She learned early how to make herself small, as if shrinking could spare her from notice and pain. In the narrow house where she lived, every day began with tension, thick in the air, and ended with the dull ache of bruises she learned to hide. Harsh words were as common as the rising sun, and blows followed close behind, delivered without remorse by those who were supposed to protect her. They called it discipline, said it was her fault, said she deserved it. Over time, she almost believed them. She carried out her chores in silence, eyes lowered, heart guarded, knowing that any mistake, real or imagined, could trigger another outburst of cruelty. Yet deep within her, something fragile but stubborn refused to die. In stolen moments, when the house finally slept, she would press her forehead against the window and stare at the distant hills, imagining what freedom might feel like, wondering if a life without fear truly existed. The beatings did not only scar her body, they tried to erase her sense of self. She learned to measure her steps, her words, even her breathing. To avoid provoking anger, laughter became a forgotten sound, replaced by the constant effort to endure. Some days, despair weighed so heavily on her chest that it felt hard to stand. Still, she rose because survival had become her quiet rebellion. When the pain became unbearable, she found brief escape in the open land beyond the settlement. Nature never judged her. The wind did not strike her, and the river did not shout. There, she felt almost human again. One evening, after a particularly brutal day, her legs carried her farther than usual. Tears blurred her vision as exhaustion overtook her, and she collapsed near the riverbank, believing this might be the end. The sky above her burned with fading color, as if the world itself was wounded yet beautiful. She barely noticed the sound of approaching hooves until they slowed and stopped nearby. Fear surged through her, instinctively bracing for more pain. Instead, a calm presence surrounded her, steady and unthreatening. She did not know who stood there or why fate had led him to her, only that something felt different. In that fragile moment, as darkness settled and her consciousness wavered, the life she had known began to loosen its grip, making space for a destiny she could not yet imagine. When she awoke, the first thing she noticed was the absence of pain. Not that it was gone, but it was no longer sharp and overwhelming. A soft warmth surrounded her, and the air smelled of earth and smoke rather than fear. Panic rose in her chest as she tried to sit up, expecting shouts or blows for moving without permission. Instead, a gentle hand motioned for her to rest. Her eyes focused slowly on unfamiliar faces, calm and watchful, not cruel. She trembled, convinced this kindness was a trick, something that would soon turn against her. Years of abuse had taught her to distrust silence more than shouting. As her senses cleared, she realized she was in a camp, sheltered and protected. The Apache chief stood nearby, his presence steady and unyielding, like the mountains she once gazed at from afar. He spoke to her in a low, measured voice, asking her name, offering water, giving her space to answer or remain silent. She struggled to speak at first, words catching in her throat as if they feared punishment too. When she finally told fragments of her story, she expected disbelief or blame. Instead, she saw understanding in his eyes and something close to sorrow. No one had ever listened to her without judgment before. The days that followed felt unreal. Her wounds were cleaned and wrapped by women who treated her with care, never raising their voices, never demanding more than she could give. Each small act of kindness unsettled her, because it contradicted everything she believed about the world. She waited constantly for the moment when the cruelty would return. But it did not. She was given food without earning it through pain, a place to sleep without fear of being dragged awake. Slowly, the tight knot inside her chest began to loosen. When her family arrived, anger and entitlement written on their faces, terror flooded her again. She expected to be handed back, to be told she had caused trouble. Instead, the Apache chief stepped forward, his voice calm but firm, drawing a line that could not be crossed. He spoke of honor, of protection, of the shame of harming the defenseless. His words carried the weight of law and spirit. In that moment, she understood something profound. She was no longer alone. Someone had chosen to stand for her, not out of pity, but out of principle. And for the first time in her life, safety was not a dream, but a reality she could finally touch. Freedom did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, in moments she almost missed. At first, she woke each morning expecting fear to greet her, her body tense and ready for pain. But the camp stirred with purpose, not cruelty, and no one shouted her awake. The days began with work, yet it was shared work, guided and respected. She was taught how to ride, how to gather herbs, how to move across the land with confidence rather than caution. Each new skill felt like a small victory, proof that she was capable of more than merely enduring. Her hands, once used only to serve and shield herself, now shaped her own future. The Apache chief never hovered over her or demanded gratitude. His guidance came through quiet example. He spoke to her as an equal, asking her thoughts, valuing her choices. At first, this frightened her more than anger ever had. She was unused to being trusted. Slowly, she learned that strength did not have to be loud or violent. It could be patient, steady, and protective. As weeks passed, her posture changed. She no longer walked with eyes fixed on the ground. The weight she had carried for so long began to lift, replaced by a growing sense of belonging. Her scars remained, both seen and unseen, but they stopped defining her. Instead of hiding them, she learned to understand them as marks of survival, not shame. Around the evening fires, stories were shared, and when she finally found the courage to speak, her voice no longer shook. Others listened, just as she once had been listened to. In their eyes, she saw respect rather than pity. The girl who believed she deserved pain slowly faded, replaced by a woman who understood her own worth. One night, as she stood beneath a sky crowded with stars, she realized her destiny had truly changed, not because someone had rescued her, but because someone had shown her a different way to live, a way rooted in dignity and choice. The cruelty of her past no longer held power over her future. She was no longer defined by the family that broke her, but by the strength she had reclaimed. In that understanding, she found something greater than freedom. She found herself.